the thing that fascinates me about this area, about shale gas policy, is the wide opinions and interests people have got about the health and safety regulations. Some people think there are no regulations. Some people think that the regulations only apply offshore. Some people think we need more regulations. Some people think it's self-regulated. And others think that there are tough regulations in place, but they are necessary. So all that, I suppose, is great from the point of view of a health and safety person, because at last you don't have to actually wear an anorak to talk about health and safety regulations. So what I thought I'd do this morning is try and tell you a little bit about what the regulations are all about, and the regulatory framework, so that you can make up your own mind, decide what you think. So the Health and Safety Executive, what we do is we're the health and safety regulator for Great Britain, and we cover lots of different sectors, including construction and high hazard chemical sectors and offshore. But from the point of view of shale, our big interest is well integrity, which is the area that we focus on. It's important not just for the safety of the workers on site, as the well operator must manage the risks properly to all the workers on site and anyone who could be affected by the work, but it also is key for environmental protection that Tony will cover when I've finished. And we're one of a number of regulators in this area. It's quite a complex regulatory landscape. It starts with DEC and the licensing people, and we sit in the middle there with the environmental regulators and with the local authority mineral planners. And it's only when we all give the thumbs up to DEC that drilling can actually start on a well. Okay, so what are the main hazards? Well, the key hazard for us is an unplanned release of fluids from the well, because that could lead to, if it gets to an ignition source, could lead to a fire or explosion. But also, if there is any leak of fluids from the well, that can have environmental impacts both on the surface or underground, and so we are a key part of the regulatory process. And so our regulations are focused on making sure that the well operator is managing that risk. What regulations have we got? Well, we've got the Health and Safety at Work Act, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which gives a general duty on all employers to manage the health and safety risks of their workers or any contractors, or indeed any members of the public that could be affected by that work. But oil and gas wells are complex engineered structures, and so there are specific regulations that sit under the Act that apply specifically to these sites. First set is the borehole sites and operations regs, which came in back in '95. And the key areas that, from those regulations are that, first of all, before work can start on a well, we need a notification from the well operator, and I'll tell you a lot about what that notification entails a bit later on. And the second part is that the operator must produce a health and safety plan, which includes an emergency plan for the site. And then there's also the offshore installations and wells design and construction regulations, which everybody gets confused about because they see offshore and they think they only apply offshore. Well, the offshore installations bit of it applies offshore, and the wells bit of it applies onshore and offshore. And these are really key regulations because this is the set of regulations that requires the operator to build the well in such a way that there can be no unplanned release of fluids from the well or from any reservoir associated with it, so far as is reasonably practicable, that good old health and safety term. But they also go on to set other requirements on the operator. They must report into HSE every week during the construction of the well and during any decommissioning and abandonment activity. And it also sets up a quality control requirement for an independent person to be appointed, an independent competent person to be appointed as a well examiner. And this isn't a self-regulation, it's quality control, but I'll tell you more about that later on as well. Okay, so how do we actually can do our work? What do we do? Well, it all starts actually with industry standards, and like many other industry standards, HSE contribute to the industry standards for the oil and gas industry. They work with people like Ken's organisation and with Oil and Gas UK to help set the industry standards to ensure that safety is built in at that top level. And following on from that, we start to look at individual wells and individual operators. And we use what's called a life cycle approach, which means that we start before the well is actually drilled, and we carry it on right until they finish actually decommissioning and abandoning the well. And we don't just do it on our own. We actually work with the environmental regulators, particularly with the Environment Agency. Since 2012, we've had a working together agreement with the Environment Agency, so we jointly regulate shale sites. Okay, so what is this notification and what does it all mean? Well, part of the information we get on the notification is we get informed about the actual rig that is being used, what pressure control equipment the operator will use, what blowout preventers, and a lot of detailed information about all the equipment that is actually going to be used in the drilling process. And we get that so that we can ensure that they've got the right equipment on site, both to actually drill the borehole safely and to control any type of threat of a blowout or an unplanned release of fluids. We also get information on the programme of work, the timings, and what contractors and people like that will be on site. And we get drawings of the actual well itself, and drawings of the well in relation to any other underground workings, and geological information as well, so that we can ensure that the risks of the well interacting with any other type of borehole nearby or underground mine working are being managed properly, and that the risks associated with the geology, so any type of known permeability or prospect of them hitting gas pockets, things like that, can be managed. So once we've got all that information, we then start to, our expert well engineers we employ, who cover both onshore and offshore, start to look through the information, and they will pick up any issues that they have. I'm going to give you one example, which is the well at Priesthall in Lancashire, which is the only well that's actually been hydraulically fractured so far. And before we were happy with the company to start work on that well, we had 5 separate meetings with them and numerous other conversations to ensure that we were happy with the information that they'd supplied and what they planned to do. When they are allowed to start work on the well, we then get an update from the company every week to ensure that what they're doing matches with what they've told us they're going to do in the notification. And that includes the results of any type of integrity testing or pressure testing that they do on the well. How far they've actually drilled, which is important to understand whether the well is being completed as expected, and importantly the drill fluid density, because the drill fluid density tells us whether the well is experiencing the conditions that we were expected at the beginning. Once the well reaches the end of its life cycle and it's starting to be decommissioned and abandoned, that process starts again. Okay, and it also starts again if the operator needs to go back in and refresh or re-drill the well at any stage. So again, we get a new notification, and the weekly operations reports start again. I won't say too much about abandonment. One thing I will say is, though, that we ensure that, again, that the well is abandoned to industry standards, which means that there will be at least 2 cement plugs in the well, which will be over 100 feet in length. And there's any porous rock strata is plug above that. So that from the well engineers tell me that it's extremely unlikely that any fluids would escape from the well post-abandonment if it's abandoned in the correct manner. And I'll just finish off with a little bit about the independent well examiner, which, as I said before, isn't self-regulation for the industry. It is quality control. It's an important quality control mechanism, and it is part of the regulations. And the reason why some people think that this is self-regulation is because the well examiner can, by law, be part of the same company as the drilling operator. Most quality control people in big companies are part of the same organisation. What the law sets out is a financial separation between these people. And if you look at the onshore industry, all independent well examiners are from separate companies from the drillers. It's not financially practicable for them to employ their own at this stage. So what we make sure is that the well examiner has got the right level of independence and the right level of competence to do their job properly. And it's their job to make sure that the well is being drilled to the right standards and that the regulations are being complied to as well as ours. And we check that, like I said, we know who the well examiner is, that we're informed, and it's also part of the regulation that we're informed where their records are, so we can check their records if we need to. Okay, so hopefully that's a little bit about the health and safety regime, a little bit about what we actually do and how we regulate the industry. And it's not just about us sitting, in an office somewhere looking at the reports that are sent in. We do site visits as well. We do joint site visits with the Environment Agency that we are, committed to as part of our working together agreement. And a little bit about the role of the independent well examiner. Okay, it's up to you to decide.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Thank you.